Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fast Forward Diversity and Inclusion. My name is Hannah Wilson, and my co host.
I'm Isa Buencamino.
And we are delighted to be hosting today's webcast. This is the first in a pilot series of 12 interviews.
So our first guest is Rhodora Palomar-Fresnedi. So Rhodora is an internationally awarded advocate for diversity and inclusion. She was the first global vice president of diversity for Unilever, a post she held 20 years ago. And since then, she held other positions where her innovative approach to large-scale change, whether in corporate settings or non-government and government organizations, is well recognized. Her passion remains deeply rooted in changing the world from wherever she is at the moment. And she has lived in several countries. She's lived in the US, the UK, Singapore, Philippines. When she was in the UK, most of her work centered around helping women fast track into leadership roles, and she's widely cited in this work in international books like Why Women Mean Business and Keeping Talented Women on the Road to Success. More recently, she has applied her business and consulting skills in providing employment and livelihood opportunities for persons with disabilities. So, from a top table corporate job, she's now into farming. And her latest advocacy is Sunshine Farms, a people with disability operated sunflower farm in the Philippines. Now, doing this job is where she picked up the nickname Tita Sunshine. And in English, that actually means Auntie Sunshine. And when you meet her in person, I think you'll know why that is. Now, she often says that she does not hire people with disabilities to grow and sell sunflowers, that she actually grows and sells sunflowers and hire people with disabilities. So how amazing is that? So we're very excited to welcome Rhodora.
Welcome to the show, Rhodora. We're delighted you're joining us from the Philippines. I know it's 4:00 in the afternoon for you there. So my first question, as head of diversity and inclusion, you've got years and years of experience. What have you learned about this agenda? Like, what do people need to know about how to lead positive change when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
First, hello. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Isa. Thanks for having me here. It's a great Sunday afternoon. And so happy Sunday to the UK world as well. Um, Great question. After 20 years, what have I actually learned? One of the key things that I think is critical in starting this work is having a vision. I know that's a little said too often, and you'd say, okay, every work that you've done should have a vision, but I'm actually talking a vision with a vivid description. So don't start with this work if you don't have a picture of what you want at the end of it, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because this work is for the long haul, without having a clear picture of what success is. And when I say vivid description, it should not only ask the physical dimension of what you'd like to achieve, whether it's the number of diverse people or dimensions you have there, but actually how it feels to be there. What would it look like, or how would it feel like to be in that community, in whether it's a school setting, a corporate setting, or just a small community, an NGO, or what you should be able to define what what it feels to be there. So they'd always say the picture is, well, this work is about, I'd call this the work of the soul. And so a soul always thinks in pictures. Now, we are really diverse as people. It's a natural state of humanity. We're diverse, but we don't know how to harness the power of diversity. And when we work in this, we actually talked about both diversity and inclusion. So you can't do just diversity without the inclusion bit, because diversity is the what, inclusion is the how. I'd always say that diversity is growth. And you cannot have diversity enabled, whether it's a personal growth for an individual or a growth for a company, without working on inclusion. So if I would have someone think about what needs to be done first, it's about having a vivid description of what your vision should be. I'd, of course, have many more, but I'll start with that.
Fantastic. So, Okay, so Rhodora, how do you then measure that the success of that vision? I mean, and how many ways have you ever measured the success?
Um, Measurement is a tricky thing because when people talk about diversity, they always talk numbers and numbers of physical count of how many women, how many people with disability, how many LGBT do you have. Those are just physical dimensions. But what you'd actually want to measure is a measure of inclusion, which is no matter what gender, race, creed, religion, or whatever difference a person would have, would that person who comes in actually be able to say, I am valued, I belong, I make a difference? So, if you would have any measure of success for diversity, just take those three. Would anybody who comes in, no matter what difference a person would have, say, I belong here, I don't feel excluded here, I am able to contribute as myself here, I am valued here, I am not the other in this space, which is a critical thing. Because when somebody different walks into a set community, a homogeneous community, you'd always feel like you're the other. I'm different. I'm not from here. I'm not heard. I'm invisible. So if you are successful in whatever in that space in diversity and inclusion, anybody could just walk in and say, wow, I don't feel I'm the other here. And if you're able to set measures which will get you there, which is about behavioral measures, not counting measures, not, okay, do we have 50 women, 50 men in this room? That's not it. It's about, would any kind of woman, would any kind of man walk into that room with whatever beliefs they have and say, I don't have to be anybody but me here? That would be a fantastic achievement.
Rhodora, like, yeah, absolutely. Everything you're saying is really resonating with me as an educational leader. And I know the language carver is constantly changing. We hear diversity and inclusion, inclusion and diversity, equality, diversity, inclusion. One of the words that's coming up a lot is belonging. And I know we've now got like heads of belonging in workplaces. And I've had lots of conversations this week with school leaders about how can we meaningfully create a culture of belonging. Like, any tips there for leaders about how you go about actually creating the behavior change to create that culture?
Belonging is a big thing, and belonging is the feeling of someone who comes in. But what you're asking is, what do I do, whoever I am, educator or a leader, so that somebody would feel that he or she belongs? Now that's tough because the challenge for leaders, for educators, is to create the environment. As an individual, it's a difficult thing because it's always about the software, hardware. It's like, how do I behave? But it's also what infrastructure that I put in so somebody would feel that he belongs. So I'll give you just a small example of not belonging. Um, I am an Asian woman with this color, and I walked into Unilever headquarters back in early 2000, where 50% of the top leadership are Anglo-Dutch, and most of them 6 feet tall, because it's like Dutch. Now, how would somebody who's below 6 feet feel that he would belong there when all the desks, all the infrastructure, all the settings are for 6 feet tall white men? So even in that simple things in creating the space, in terms of education, you'd look at how is the physical environment configured and set up so that everybody, no matter what height, no matter what ability, would feel that he or she belongs. If you have a physical disability and your classroom is on the third floor, how would access be as easy for you as the others? So that's part of making someone feel they belong. You have access, not just physical access, but you also have like mental access. You have the language access. If it's education, is everything taught in old English, like Shakespeare's English, when they can hardly talk about like everyday English. So it's about access and making access, in a sense, neutral, so that whoever you are, you would have the same access to the things that are necessary for you to perform, whether in a classroom or in a corporation. So that's the physical setting for belonging. But there's also the software. How do people make you feel in terms of when you walk into the room? If they look at you head to foot and say, oh my gosh, she's very different from all of us, that would certainly put up barriers, the non-physical barriers that get in because somebody makes you feel you don't belong here. So belonging is both a physical. There should always approach for both physical, um, the organizational, and there should also be, in a sense, the emotional part of belonging. And you should address both the physical infrastructure, the hardware, and the software of belonging. It cannot be just one or the other.
That's amazing. I've never thought of it like that. Software, hardware. That's an interesting way of putting it. Now, when you're talking about, walking into that office where everyone is 6 feet tall and their chairs and their tables are like suited for people like that. I mean, I'm sure it never occurred to them that it's not appropriate. People don't step into this space necessarily wanting to be non-inclusive, right? I mean, yeah. So how do you help people see, right? See what they can't see. I mean, what ways have you done it before?
That's a fantastic question, because it's actually the first thing. Do not assume that people have mean harm or that there's malice in it. It's like you'll have to respect wherever people are. The corporate world or even the educational system was initially built for certain types of people. And so we're inheriting part of that. So without judging where people have been, we should just say, maybe that doesn't work now. So let's see how that will change. So I would always, even when I was coaching CEOs, I would always say, I respect where you are. And it's okay. Wherever you are is okay. Wherever the space is okay. Whatever gets in the way right now is okay. And you don't have to change, but you need to get into conversation, and you need to get into courageous conversation, because when the conversation is good, then change happens. So that's one thing. The second thing, Isa, is when you say, well, they need both sides would have to learn. I had to learn how to speak so they would listen to me, and they had to learn how to talk so I could hear them. So that's why we had reciprocal mentoring. Both of us need to learn. The fault of some diversity advocates, not the fault, but maybe a difficulty that some diversity advocates have, is this saying, but they don't understand, this so far behind. But we're diversity advocates, we're always ahead. So we've seen these things before, but a difficult conversation is, how do you have a conversation with someone who's just starting on the journey? So you have to respect where people are, and as long as they're willing to take the journey with you, then say, okay, I would have to learn how to speak to you. And so that's how we brought the chairman actually into this conversation. That's another tip that you have. If you're going to change something, you just need to go to the top. So for reciprocal mentoring, you have to have reciprocal mentoring with the top leaders, and maybe match them up with somebody like way below, so they'll have a full, it's really stretching, and they'll have a full understanding of what's going on. Now, this physical thing is not just about corporations. I mean, a certain awareness that people would have is, they would say, for example, what's the barrier for having more women surgeons or more Asian surgeons? It's not so much I do not have the capacity to do that kind of job. It's just the instruments are too big for their hands. So it's particularly if it's made by German companies, modeled after German men, and then you have a Japanese woman trying to be a surgeon using instruments made by German men. That's an example of how the physical environment and how the tools are designed for certain types of people which becomes a barrier to the advancement of diversity and inclusion. And again, it's not judging what has happened before. You take wherever you are and move from there and ask what needs to change so we can advance this agenda forward.
Rhodora, when we first chatted, you've painted this picture for me of this beautiful Asian woman in a yellow dress weaving around a kind of a dinner party with sort of like big white men in suits, and it's really struck with me. It's really stayed with me, and I'm just interested in how you, as the outsider, as the other, how you sort of dug deep and found the resilience, I guess, to navigate that space when you were the first, when you were the only one.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question, because my husband just told me, in fact, he told me, said, you know, if you're going to think about it, what are the things that work for you? This is a long time conversation. I said, you know what? One thing that I think really worked for me, and someone asked me that question maybe 10 years ago. And I said, I was never awestruck with them. I respect their position. I value their contribution. I was in a reciprocal mentoring relationship with the chairman of Unity River. Back then, there were two of them. But what helped me say exactly what I needed to say and make the changes that needed to be changed was because while I have firm belief in what they're trying to do, and they're brilliant men, hats off to them with their brilliance and their values. I was actually not, I was not awestruck that I cannot say anything to them directly. And so it's about having the confidence to be who I am and not having any further agenda for self promotion. This is about the agenda. This is not about me, which is one thing that any advocate should really put in their head, would say, this is not about you. It's like, actually for coaches, it's the same thing. It's like, it's not about you. When you try and do something while you bring in the value of your experience and your perspective, you are not making the change to make life better for you. You're making the change to make life better for a bigger number of people. And always say, think big, start small, move fast. And when you think big, you really think big. You think, where in the world would the next talent come from? And everything is open, and it's like all cards there, and show me everyone. So it's accepting that I am an enabler, and I'm there for a mission, but it's not about me. And that knowledge that I'm doing something bigger than myself makes me confident that, one, this is the right thing that needs to be done, and two, I can do it, and three, I have to do it because I see it, and I had to learn how to communicate and express what I see and what needs to be done to the people who can make them happen. I mean, this is a lot of campaigning and advocacy and saying, we need to do this. I didn't have staff before when we started. It's like I had to find people who believe in the same thing. Because diversity and yes, Isa included, diversity and inclusion in 2000 was something you don't talk about in corporations. They'd say, what diversity and inclusion? Europe is diverse by itself. You don't have to do anything. It could be diverse, but are we inclusive? So believing something needs to be done and having the confidence that I can do however far I can go, but also the humility that I can't do it alone.
So I'm going to go to chat feed right now and pick up a question from there. Someone is asking, Chrissy is asking, because you've done this all over the world. You have pushed diversity inclusion in a lot of different organizations, and she's asking, what do you do what do you do if the organization or group that you're part of thinks it's inclusive, right? But you feel like an outsider. You're feeling like an outsider, but the group that you're with believes it's inclusive. I mean, how do you break through that?
That's a really exciting challenge because it's like uphill. But like they say, okay, that's something uphill that's existing. What's worse if you create a hill by yourself. It's like, don't create barriers for yourself. Um, I said earlier, it's like wherever they are is okay. It's like even if they believe they're the most inclusive organization, even I've met some leaders who also said, I am inclusive. Look at me, I have X number of diverse people in my team, blah, blah, blah. The key thing is asking the right question. So, for example, leaders who think they are inclusive because, in fact, I had a talk just recently on that. Someone said, a leader said, but I don't have to worry about women in management. I have 5 women in my team, and there's only 1 man in a team of 6. And so I said, well, congratulations. Question, would any of those women succeed you? So in that moment, it'd say, oh, okay. So asking the precise question at the right time would say, okay, I'm not that inclusive after all, if none of them. Of course, initially, there would be hee-hawing and say, oh, but I picked the right, the perfect person, whoever's qualified and all. Said, yeah, but and then the 5:1. What are the chances that the 1 man in your team would be the one who will succeed you? So it's like we all kind of know the answer to that. So those are the things that would make people realize without being in your face. It's like if you see it first, you can't tell the organization, oh, you're lying. It's like it's the worst thing any change agent can happen and say, no, it's not true because you're not as inclusive as you think you are. It's like be with them, be where they are, and then show them the possibility. I like working on positive things. So I like working on possibilities versus punishment. I don't like telling people, you say you're inclusive, but you're not. It's like, okay, then if you say you're inclusive, can you tell me examples? And would you like to be more inclusive? Because I don't think we will ever be fully inclusive all our lives because we can't meet 7 billion people and embrace them. but um, but we can continue to improve every single day. And so uh, it's about precise questions, asking the really sharp questions so people can see things differently.
Rhodora, that's really making me think about some conversations I've had in education. So sometimes a school leader might look at his whole team or her whole team and think it's diverse, but what they're not looking at is the position of the different people in the hierarchy. So in a lot of schools, we have white men sort of like as chairs of governors, as head teachers, but we have black women cleaning the schools. And in their mind, they've got a diverse team, but they're not considering the power and the privilege of different people in that hierarchy. So do you mean, we've talked about inclusive cultures. How about when it's a hostile environment? How like we've got a lot of people at the moment who really want to advocate diversity and inclusion, and they're hitting a lot of blockers. How do you navigate that hostility when people aren't interested in being inclusive? It's not an agenda for them.
Yes. A lot of advocates start with the business case. It's like, or the reason for change. Why would people want to change when everything's going well for them, right? So actually, that's where the first hard work will come in. For example, a lot of multinational companies didn't get into diversity and inclusion until the consumers walked out on them. So consumer product companies, for example, adopted it because it's the women agenda, because they said that 80% of purchases in a household, the decisions are made by women. So if the women are making the decisions, then why wouldn't we pay attention to our company reflecting the consumer base? But not until you have that demand did people actually listen, until you have the proper business case. Now, if there are hostile environment, maybe this may be something controversial, but maybe the hostile environment works for them, because it's always like, you're all coaches as well. It's what's the benefit of keeping a hostile environment? And so it's about discovering why does it work for them? Why does the hostile environment work for them? And what would it take for it not to work anymore? So people look it's one thing that we're always tempted to do. It's to judge. Let's say that person is not inclusive, that environment is not working and all. Um, it's okay to see it for what it is. But if we judge on a black and white basis, it's difficult to implement change because in our effort to become inclusive, we are also excluding the other. Because in a white black situation in the community, you also need the white men to make these things happen. So what you talked about is hierarchy. It's like black people doing the lower jobs and then the white people. So you need the education for the white managers on how to build an inclusive community, and for the black people at the bottom of the hierarchy to be able to assert themselves. And what would be the things that would actually provide them with opportunities to rise above their pay grade. So again, we go back to it's always both ways. So I remember one conversation I had with a white CEO who said, "You know what, Rhodora, white men have feelings too."
I really like what you said earlier, Rhodora, about, when facing a hostile environment, that sometimes it's not, you don't necessarily have to change the other person, but the context can change it. So when you talked about within a corporate setting, consumerism, and actually lately with Unilever, that they have to change the names of some of their brands because actually consumers are asking them to do it. So I like the idea that to go through, you go sideways. It's not, you don't have to do all of it yourself. Other people can do it for you too, kind of like that. I think that is a really important, I guess, message to
Yeah,
hear. I want to ask though that, because you've done this a lot of times,
sorry.
and
I
you've seen. Oh, sorry.
well, it's still one thing to that. So you go sideways, but you also make sure that you start where the system is. It's very hard to change a system if you are so far ahead from where they are. So start where people are, start where the system is, and wherever they are is okay as long as they're willing to move forward.
Which brings me to my question. So you've experienced a lot of different organizations, some more hostile than others. Have you ever walked away from an opportunity when you said this is too hostile, don't want to do it? Has that ever happened?
Um, Not because it's hostile, but because the leader is not committed. So I would always walk away when people are just faking it. So I'm not going to be an instrument for a fake it till you make it kind of deal. So if a leader asks me, I need help, he, wherever he is okay, even if it's racist, even if it's not into diversity and inclusion, as long as he's truly committed to making a change, if not for himself, then for the organization. I have walked away from situations where I would see that the leader is not sincere, because I think that's a waste of my time. And I'd rather work on people who are neutral than people who are super negative but pretending to be positive. So authenticity is really something that's fundamental in whatever you do. It's like if you need help, you sincerely want help, not because you want me as an accessory just to show the public and raise your share price by saying, look, we're doing diversity and inclusion. It's like, no, life is too short.
Yeah, Rhodora, like that, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with my concerns about the system at the moment. As a result of George Floyd's murder and the increased sort of like focus on Black Lives Matters in particular, I feel like those who have resisted for a long time in the school system are suddenly jumping to attention. And I worry that we've got like a knee-jerk reactive response to diversity and inclusion. And it needs to be authentic, that your language there about it not being fake. How can we make sure that's intentional and purposeful and not tokenistic? Because I think there's a lot of fear that we have tokenistic gestures when it comes to D&I in schools in particular.
Excellent question. Because a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives started it's a fad. That's what people do. That's what it's expected of us. The politically correct thing, so it's not authentic. There's some situations where fake it till you make it is okay. You're practicing in private, so that's okay. But in terms of like the broad thing and having knee-jerk reactions and having suddenly 10 interventions when you used to have zero, I don't advocate for that. I'd rather take it slowly and look at the school environment which teachers and educators are creating. You cannot put interventions, suddenly 5 interventions, okay, this is Black Lives Matters Day, and we watch this and all, and put people in a crash program. I mean, like any form of evolution, this has to be taken from where people are and take them in steps. So it's much like your engagement with social media, for example. First, you expose them to the material, then you like, then you comment, then you share, then you provide other materials, then you convene other groups, and then it gets bigger. But you can't suddenly bring a community and say, let's raise the flags and Black Lives Matter. No, it's not going to help. This is just my opinion. It's not going to help the cause if we rush into things, because there are things that are systemic. For example, I was just watching Into the Woods on it's like the movie. I love theater as well, but I saw it the movie version just early this morning, and I said, wait a minute, why are all witches with black hair and why are all the princesses with blonde hair? It's like, why can't have an Afro-American woman as Rapunzel, and why can it be not Cinderella, but Snow White and all of that? It's like, why can't we change that narrative? That's like hundreds of years. And why are the villains always dark hair, dark colored? That's a good way to start in schools. Bring in Hamilton and show that Jefferson and Hamilton can be non-white. That everyone, that to show a period or a character, then you don't have to be you don't have to be white. Or why the uproar on a black lady being the Little Mermaid? So if you hear something like that, they would say, discuss it in school. Can the Little Mermaid be black? And so it's introducing and opening the minds of students, of young ones, to a different conversation, not to the stereotypical story, even if it's using the 400-year-old stories, but putting it in the current context and slowly opening their minds into something that's different and provocative. Not accepting that every woman needs to be a princess who needs to be rescued. Why can't we rescue the man, for example? So, and why am I in a tower locked by my evil stepmother? It's like, change the narrative. It's like, change. You have to look at a different angle and be conscious of the stories that you tell your children, that you tell your students, that you use as examples. I love Shakespeare. And Shakespeare has fantastic stories about human nature way back 500 years ago. Look at them through a diversity lens. Even because he is into diversity and inclusion 500 years before we actually have these titles in our corporate settings. My favorite line from when I was in high school was not Portia's, but Shylock's. If you prick us, do we not bleed? So if that's what we put as heroes in our discussions, our children will be different. They'll be different human beings versus the ones glorifying that someone needs to punish the Jew who's lending money and all of that. But take it from his angle. If you tickle us, do we not laugh? Have that as a discussion. not just about being smart and being a lawyer and beating everyone. I I don't know if that helps in the education business, but I'm actually passionate about education because we need to start them young. We need to start them early because these ones, we were not born racist. We probably were raised racist, and so your racist older woman, man or woman, was probably conditioned at some point in his life or his education that the other who's different in every single way from who I am and how I'm educated is harmful to me. It's just not true. That's just not true. And education and the educational system can change that
Mm.
dramatically.
I know this for a fact that before Rhodora went to corporate jobs, she actually wanted to be a teacher. I remember this.
I wasn't.
Um, you were a teacher, yes, of course. Rhodora, so staying on the tokenism, right? So Hannah was talking about already, having all the protected characteristics available in your organization, be present in your organization. But what are your thoughts on, because even now when you are stepping into trying to make a difference in DNI, I've found some organizations where they would then organize, the women's network, the LGBT network, disability network, the BAME network, and it feels like that is like an automatic response that you have to have all these subgroups. Do you think that if is that necessary, that if we were really pushing for inclusion, does it matter? Because when to your point, pricking somebody's skin, whether whatever, disabled, black, white, we all bleed. Do we have to do it like that?
Um, yeah, it gives people the confidence and the security to find someone similar to them. So, as a first step, I don't mind when people have women's networks, LGBT network, and all, because um, you need to actually understand yourself, and sometimes it's in that process it's very difficult to talk to somebody very different from you, and they'd say, oh, I have that concern too. We help an LGBT chamber of commerce, and until we help them envision what it is they wanted, they weren't very sure what they're actually fighting for, because there's always the rights and inclusions, like we're fighting for our rights. And for the different groups that we advise, and always say, okay, so you have your rights, but you don't have the capability, what would you do? And then they realize, oh, okay, then we should fight for equal access to opportunity. Okay, that makes more sense. Don't fight for your rights if you don't know what you do when you get your rights, something like that. So the LGBT Chamber of Commerce was actually trying to say rights of LGBTs in the workplace. And I say, okay, how does that look like? Tell me how it looks like, or blah 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 blah, and all. Now, when we finally got into there, what I wanted to do, it actually boiled down to the the acknowledgement of the special contribution of LGBTs in the workplace. That's what they wanted. And so it's an entirely different approach if you'd say, I want our contribution to be acknowledged, and whether we're LGBT or not, that we have a contribution in the workplace. Sometimes it's even that we have a unique contribution because we're LGBT. And that's what they worked on, proving that whatever special qualities they have, whether it's through their networks, their own abilities or not, should be something that should be acknowledged in the workplace. You know what? That's one of our um, very successful support, because 3 years later they partner with the Netherlands Embassy and launch all of their efforts, succeeding in every space that they set out about 3 years before, which is the recognition that they're just as good, if not better, than the other non-LGBT groups. That they have a contribution, that there's a system. We also had the first base, which is who are the LGBTs in the workplace, because they're so afraid to be stigmatized that they're not coming out. literally, which is the same thing for other forms of inclusion. That's why the Women's Network, the LGBT Network, they're helpful because it encourages people to be comfortable in their own skin and to be comfortable in who they are, fully contributing in any community or any corporate environment.
Can we talk about fear a bit more, Rhodora? Because I know we've talked before about the fact that there's the fear of the other, there's the fear of criticism, there's the fear of being visible. I mean, ultimately, we're wanting to enable a diversity and inclusion agenda, but the disabler is fear, isn't it? And I'm just wondering about how we navigate this fear as a barrier.
Yes, and that's where actually I'll point out most of the um, racism is partly fear. The fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, the fear of uncertainty. What will this person do to me? Or how will this person perform? So we don't actually give people chances because I told Lisa this one time we were having a conversation. All people have biases. And the problem with biases is by themselves, the biases are okay. It's a problem when it becomes a barrier to somebody's sense of belonging, when it becomes a barrier to the other. Fear is like that. Fear is okay, but if you allow it to be a barrier to you knowing the other person on a more deeper level, then it is a problem. I would say, where's the fear coming from? It's like this is where your own self-education is important because you have nobody can guess where your fear is coming from. You will have to understand, and that's why I always say diversity and inclusion is everybody's job, because if you have a bias, if you have a fear, you are the only person who can understand where that fear is coming from, whether it's a previous experience or something you've read or something you've seen. um, I'd always say confront your fear, go to the edge of your discomfort and find out what's getting in the way of you risking more, trusting somebody more, giving somebody a chance, giving hope a chance, giving yourself a chance to grow and know another person. What's getting in the way? But you talked about hostile environment earlier. Some people just wouldn't move. They just say, I'll stay here in my little safe corner. But no, in this day and age, there's no safe corner. It's like you will have to go out there and embrace more people who's different from you if you want to have a life that's more flourishing and filled with more opportunities, because it's an entirely different world. So you, every person, me, would have to go to the edge of our discomfort as often as we can.
So, Rhodora, can I ask you on a personal level, right? How is there anything that you say to yourself or anything that helps you step over this fear? So, for example, yesterday I was contemplating on writing this blog about something of my own personal experience as an Asian woman living here in the UK. And I ended up not writing it because I was really afraid that I would make people angry, right? I would make people angry. And I really was not sure whether I should or shouldn't. And is there like anything advice that you can give that would help people like me or anyone who is about to jump off or cross the line of this fear, just to help us feel a little bit braver? Is there anything is there like a criteria to say, yes, you do that, or no, don't do that? Is there anything like that that actually exists?
I love your example because it's very common that we second guess what's going to happen. But I'm quite Buddhist about this one. It's like one is, who are you doing it for? It's like if it's an full expression of who you are with the purest of intention, what does it matter if one person likes it and 10 people hate it? That one person is enough. You've connected to that one person. So for me, always clear because I do write about those things too, and I say okay, whoever this touch, that's okay, but I'm actually doing it for me. It's my self-expression. That's one. Two, it doesn't matter what the consequences. I deal with that after, because at this moment, this is what I feel like I need to do. So I follow. I mean, that adage, like follow your heart, is said so often, but not a lot of people do it. I mean, because it's a follow your heart, and then you keep thinking and analyzing. What about this and this and that? By that time, the moment has passed. It's like gone. The inspiration has gone. But it's like just do it, and that's what I mean by like just take more risk. But for me, there's only a question of what is your intention. So if your intention for writing, for example, is getting 100 responses or likes, then that's a little difficult. That's a result, because that's not an objective. That's a consequence of what you do. That's a result, which you have no control about. But you have a control on whether you'd write or not. So I would say, Isa, if you feel like it, just do it, because I know your intention is pure. You want to put it out there and see what contribution there would be. I think the world would be sadder or less complete if you do not put your thoughts out there. My son has a perfect reminded me. I learned from him. 21 years old. He said, even silence is violence. So keeping quiet now is also depriving whoever would benefit from whatever you'd say or write, or if you contribute, like in Black Lives Matter, if you keep silent about it, that's contributing to the violence. So it's not the time to be quiet. It's not the time to withhold and fear about what other people would say. They can say what they want. That contributes to the conversation. Negative or not, at least you're able to have them say something. It's like, just like what actors and actresses say. They'd say, good or bad publicity, that's still publicity. The more people who are advocating, talking about it, raising concerns about it, the better it is for the cause. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, I call it diffabilities, different abilities for persons with disability, whether it's Pride, whether it's LGBT cause, or women in management. The more people who are advocating for it in whatever way, the better it is for diversity and inclusion everywhere. So
Yeah, but
don't.
no, at all. Like that, everything you're saying is what I'm processing. Between we fear being criticised, we fear getting it wrong. What we should fear is things not getting better. And if we focus on positive change and the impact we can individually have within this collective vision, if we can move the conversation into this kind of like, what can we do? We've got lots of people listening today. Individually, they're all committed. They might not be in an organization that enables that. What's your advice to individuals to start this journey from moving from passive to active? What are some of the next steps they can individually take?
Yes. Yeah. One of the things is to map out a progression on how your involvement would be. Like I said, if you it could be any of those social media levels, for example, like it first, comment, share it first, move up, design your own community, write something as Isa would be, put it out there. That could be one of those. Or it can be as simple as, if you're a parent, read something to your child that's very different from his exposure, or his or her exposure. If you're an educator, educate yourself on a different material. If you're in the UK, for example, there's a lot of like Indian stories you could tell the class, instead of just the English literature stories, for example. It's about the stories that we tell. We could all try a different story, but we can only tell a different story if we have a different experience. So my invitation for all is to expose yourself to someone who's very different, and to actually live with their own struggle, to actually reach out to someone or something very different from us. So I would say, on a small scale, be a friend to someone very different from you. Listen to the story of someone you don't like. Reach out to someone who actually repels you. It's like, uh, go to the edge of your discomfort. If you're a Catholic, reach out to a Muslim, and vice versa. I've done this as a training and development for one of our top leaders. If you're homophobic, listen to the story of a homosexual. If you're fully able, spend a day with someone who has a disability in whatever form, and especially, for example, mental disability, which is hidden because we have stereotypes of what disabilities are. But someone who has mental disability, spend a day with that person. Um, if you are someone who's a man, hang out with a not one woman, a group of women who's actually talking about things that you don't want to listen to, but force yourself to actually echo what they say. So just have an open mind. So on a small scale, we can do all of this. If you're a young person, let's say the Gen Z, talk to a boomer. Spend 2 hours with your parents, for example. Our kids do. We learn from them. And if you are young, release your gadget and ask your older people stories of their lives. So change our stories, change our narrative by exposing ourselves to something that's very different from our realm of experience. Go out every single day, find something you haven't done before, you haven't talked to be, a person you haven't talked to before, a topic you haven't handled, an experience you haven't created, or create something, do something. Pandemic time, perfect time to experiment in all of those. That's it. It's just like exercising our flexibility. So start with the small things, and then when you become flexible and more open, then you go to the grander things. There are more things. Do diversity and inclusion in a bigger way. But 20 years on this one, I'm still learning something every day, and I have to give myself permission um, to say I forgive myself if I make mistake, if I make a mistake sometime. But to say pick up, you just make it quicker from the time you experience it and learn something about it. Pick up yourself, and there's always tomorrow. What matters is just this moment. How inclusive are you this moment, and how inclusive will you be tomorrow? You don't know how inclusive will you be unless you make um, a conscious effort that you want to be inclusive, that you want to learn about this topic, that you want to embrace humanity, that you want to connect to someone and express your shared humanity. Because after all, this is about our shared humanity. All of us, all over the world, we're the same. We love, we cry, we love to be with family, we rejoice when we have achievements in the family. We even rejoice more when it's not our own, that it's our children's achievements. That's the same all over the world, no matter what we wear, no matter what color we have. uh, trust trust that everywhere around the world, no matter how different we look, we're all the same inside, and we all hope for the same things.
Thank you, Rhodora. And I think that's really important what you said there about the permission to make mistakes. I think my frame would be we make a bigger mistake by doing nothing. It's a smaller mistake to do it and to get it wrong. And like, do you mean I advocate diversity inclusion all the time. And sometimes I send a tweet or I write a blog and there's a word or a phrase that jars someone, but that helps me grow and learn because someone then reads it and says, well, I'm not quite sure I like your choice of word there. And it starts a conversation. And you spoke earlier on as well about the kind of the criticism, because my other fear around the D&I agenda is it's become a deficit model and we are critiquing everything that is wrong rather than amplifying everything that's right. And I think we need to have an appreciative inquiry about what's working and how can we kind of scale that up. We've got a really good question in the feed, and I think it's from one of our listeners who's in Canada, asking about cliques. Okay, cliques are the opposition to diversity. How do we unpick and break up cliques where you have those tight knit circles and networks that appear to be quite impenetrable?
Well, it probably works for them. So they have the clicks because it works for them. So everything is about time and timing. So I believe clicks would uh, outlive its usefulness at some point or the other. But while it's there, um, we can help by not judging it, but by understanding why it exists in the first place. So, is it the safety and security of a particular company? Is it because they're working on they're protecting each other? It's usually about financial security for some of them, but it's about understanding what it is. And I like what you said earlier, Hannah, about not the deficit model. I'm a hope and happiness seller. I'd rather sell diversity and inclusion as you need to do this because this is really attractive. So it's one way of breaking the clicks, is presenting the alternative to it. Because if that's where they feel the safety and security, then it's very difficult to break that up. But if you open the possibility that a non-click option is just as exciting, if not better, a more diverse and inclusive community, then maybe they will change their minds. And it may start with just one person, then two people, then three people. It's not so much as aiming to break the click, but saying there are other alternatives. Because in my heart of hearts, I believe people want to be good, and they want to be inclusive, but but for some reason, whatever it is that has happened in their lives, I mean, they're starting to close up. But if we open enough for them, then I think we could infect a lot more people who will connect with us, advocates, or with other non-click people. But we have to give them a chance. So we cannot be inclusive if we judge exclusive groups.
So, Rhodora, if we think about, this is your last question as well, like the last hour's gone so quickly. If we think about the context we're currently in, if we think about the COVID lens, if we think about the impact of lockdown around the world on the D&I agenda, we've got a lot of work to do. What does the rest of this year look like? What is your vision for sort of like September through to Christmas for what we can do individually and collectively to drive this agenda forward?
Yes. I don't think the work has changed. I think the work has gone intense, but the platform has changed because of COVID. We need to maximize the use of the digital platform. I've spoken, which is even I think actually more effective because this is one-on-one, face-to-face, and then we can review it. I've spoken in a group of, for example, 1,000 people, but I don't know how many people I have actually touched with that. So, but in here, learning how to use this platform more effectively, I could have one-on-one, and I don't know how many people are in the call right now. I could have more people who could listen to it, and they could pass it on, and then they could retweet it or spread it in a different way. So you can experience it at many different levels in your own time. So I think we have fantastic platforms coming out of COVID, which we can maximize in enabling this. Um, Between now and December, I think we should not let up on whether it's Black Lives Matter, LGBT, and Pride. I mean, Pride Month shouldn't just be June. You know, it's like every day should be Pride Day, and disability should be every day. But I'm okay with where it is now, as long as we keep moving forward. So the problem is it's summer and all of these things are happening, and then it gets cold, and then we forget about them. So it's like, don't let up. Don't let up. Keep moving. I always say, you asked Isa earlier about measures. I would say, how do you know you get there? I said, for me, it's not about arriving at something. I'd always say it's progress, not perfection. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. It's like one more female teacher or one more Black teacher in your school system, one more woman in management, one more LGBT in top management. more lives being saved and Black Lives Matter, that's progress. I mean, whatever is negative is happening, it's going to happen. Things like this will continue to happen, but we have to keep our hopes up. We have to keep the optimism. I've just realized that, hope and optimism are not the same. I love the definition of them being so different. It's like hope is inherent in every person. It's not about the positive thing. Someone said that hope is the belief that everything will make sense and everything will be all right. Optimism is about thinking it's going to be positive, but having a faith that we'll get there. Diversity and inclusion in the way we envision humankind, all of humanity, will get there. But we all need to work together every single day.
How fantastic! That's a fantastic ending to the show. I can't believe it's been an hour already, Hannah. Hope. Every day wake up and believe that whatever you do today makes a difference. Hannah, how about you? What's your final takeout from today's session?
I want to download your brain, Rhodora. Like, seriously, just the experience you have cross-sector in a kind of a global context. I know from the traction in the feed, there's been lots of things that have really landed and really resonated. But I consider myself to be a very hopeful and optimistic person. And I hope that we can harness the collective agency from the disruption we're experiencing in the world right now. I was almost praying for a big disruption because something needs to change. And I think we need to make sure that we tap into this kind of like shared vision, this surge of energy, but we need to make sure that we streamline it and it's strategic. And as you said, it's paced and it's purposeful and it's sustainable. So that's really sort of like my hopes for the way forward. How about you, Isa? What's your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway is I've been on this journey with Rhodora 20 years ago, and it's been a long and challenging road, and sometimes it can be a bit demotivating at times. Fear comes up and all that. But watching Rhodora with us today, with the energy and the new initiative that she's doing, selling sunflowers in the Philippines, gives me a lot of energy and hope that, just keep going, and yeah, it'll be a better place in the end. The world will be a better place in the end.
It will be. It will be. I have faith and confidence in all of us, human beings.
So a few people are commenting they missed the beginning. Don't worry, if you missed the beginning of our very first Fast Forward Diversity and Inclusion, if you click on my Twitter feed at Ethical Leader, the Periscope feed is there, so you can start it back from the beginning. The live broadcast is on my YouTube channel, and we will get it edited and we'll share it back out to you. So this was our first of 12. Isa, who do we have on the show next week?
Right. So next week we're going to have Elizabeth Wright. Now, Elizabeth is a medalist, a Paralympic medalist, and so we can't wait to actually have her here. Hannah, anything more? Because Liz, somebody you've known for a long time.
Liz is a very inspiring disability advocate and campaigner, and she is doing a massive piece of work at the moment around elevating and amplifying the voices of young people with disabilities. So I'm really excited to hear a contrasting but a complementary perspective on everything Rhodora shared today. So Rhodora, thank you so much from both of us for being our first guest. You've been an absolute joy and pleasure to meet. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from the Philippines, and
I love your sunflower sunshine top. Have a fantastic Sunday, everyone, and carry the conversation on Twitter. Bye.
bye. See you.